Hello, welcome to Boardman Biography. I'm Jayden, and today we are talking with retired Fire Chief Dorman from the Boardman Fire Department about his new book. Thanks for joining us today, Chief Dorman.
Jayden, it's great to be here.
How long were you the Boardman Fire Chief?
I was the Boardman Fire Chief for 15 years, from 1996 to 2011.
That's a pretty long time.
It's a long time.
This book right here, what made you want to write it?
Well, while I was Fire Chief, I became aware that we had boxes and boxes of archived materials, pictures, articles about the fires that had been sitting around the fire station for years. And in fact, we kind of rescued the boxes from the maintenance garage behind our fire station. They were up in the attic area, and the roof was starting to leak, and a lot of the records up there were getting destroyed. So we rescued them from the garage out back, and I saw them all around, and I didn't want them to suffer the fate of some of those other records that's getting lost or getting destroyed. And I thought it would be great if we had our history all in one place. Now, most firefighters, including myself, did not know our oldest history, and I kind of thought it was in those boxes. And so, it's not a project that I took right away. I'd been retired for about 5 years, and I knew I enjoyed writing, and I was looking for a project. And so I decided that I would write the 100-year history of Boardman Fire Department. And I had a deadline because we turned 100 this past month on September the 10th. So I had 6 years of work put into this. I had 6 years to write this and get this done. And at the end of it, I produced a 700-page book.
It's worth it. I like how you saved all that history.
Well, the important part to me is for our firefighters to be able to know our history, and in order to know their history, they have to have access to it. I wanted all of the history in one spot, in one small product. So that's where the book comes in. Is the history is accessible to everybody now.
What can our readers expect to learn from this book?
Well, they can learn about the beginning of Boardman Fire Department and how it grew. They can learn that the firefighters sometimes had a very tough job, not only putting out fires, but just raising enough money to keep the fire station going. In the beginning, they had to raise money just to put gasoline in the fire truck. They put on a lot of fish fries. They put on a lot of shows to the community. And in fact, the fire department became the social hub of Boardman Township. People expected that the Boardman Fire Department would be putting on shows to help keep them entertained. And so the community actually loved the fire department, and so it made it easy for them to provide funds when they were asked through levies. So there's a lot of stories in here about the firefighters and the brave things they've done and how they risked their lives. So I think the community and retired firefighters, current firefighters can learn a lot about how we grew, and how the equipment grew, and how we also adapted to the times. We not only put out fires, we do emergency medical calls, we answer hazardous material calls. The whole growth of the Boardman Fire Department is in the book.
What is the meaning of the book?
The title is Signal 55. And originally I had the title, The 100-Year History of Boardman Fire Department. And my wife said, that's boring. So I decided to look through other books that had been written about departments, and I realized that they often put in catchphrases that were important to them. And so I looked through some documents and things that we had saved, and I realized that Signal 55 was the perfect title for the book. Signal 55, in my day of firefighting, was the signal for a structure fire. The dispatcher would tone us out, and over the speaker she would say, we have a Signal 55 at, and give an address. And so Signal 55 is the reason why the fire department was formed. Structure fires. In the earliest days, most homes were burning right to the ground. They tried to put them out with the Buckroot Brigade, but it just wasn't working very well. A Signal 55 structure fire, those houses were gone by the time anybody outside help would come in, such as Youngstown Fire Department. So I thought it was appropriate that since the fire department was formed because of the structure fires that had happened and those that they hoped to prevent or help at least put out, Signal 55 was the perfect title for the book.
I'm looking at this fire truck picture. Can you tell us about this?
Well, this is an interesting picture, and probably the first part of the interesting story is how I got it. And I ended up finding two granddaughters from our first fire chief, Merle Gifford. They live in Texas. And we talked, and then eventually I asked them if they had any scrapbook from their grandfather, Merle Gifford, and they said, sure. And they sent me a packet of articles and pictures, and then it was this and a couple other pictures, and the pictures had our first fire truck. Now, the little small one on the left is a 1923 Model T Ford, which we purchased for $641 in 1923. And this was a truck that we had known that we'd had this old truck, but we had never had a picture of it. So probably one of the big great surprises of the experience was to discover what our first fire truck looked like. And the interesting thing part on it is there's a little bell that was to be rung to help get people out of the way. They didn't have sirens back then. And the fire department saved that bell. And when Merle Gifford retired in 1961, they had saved that bell, and they gave that bell to him in appreciation for all that he had done. And the really cool thing is, well, I asked the girls, do you still have that bell? And they said, we still have the bell. And they're coming to our big celebration, which is on October the 14th, which is the same as Fire Prevention Week. And they are going to bring the bell with them, and they're going to put it on display for the public to see. And so we have in here our first fire truck, and we actually have our second fire truck also here in 1927 Model A Ford.
I think putting the bell on display is a pretty good idea.
That is going to be the greatest thing to see the bell off that first fire truck. I'm going to get a real kick out of that.
Is there anything that stands out or you want to point out about the book?
Well, the beginning history and the surprises are a real important part of the truck, important part of the story. But one of the biggest surprises that the book will reveal is that the fire station that we had originally thought was our first fire station, it was located at Southern Boulevard and 224. It was torn down for a gas station to be put up. We thought that was our first fire station. In reality, when Merle Gifford, our first fire chief, was appointed chief, he owned a small grocery store across the tracks on the park side of the tracks. And when he became fire chief, the trustees rented property off of him, and they put up a small garage. And that's where they parked this first fire truck. They put up a telephone pole with a siren on top of it, and that actually became the first fire station. The phone number, I was actually able to find the phone number of that grocery store, which was 12B19. The old phones, you would click the lever and the operator would answer, and then at that grocery store, the butcher might answer, Carl Apple. He didn't know whether somebody was ordering milk and bread or calling in a fire. So if they called in a fire, he went out and there's a switch on the telephone pole that would blow the siren. They called blowing the whistle. And so when there was a fire, Carl Apple would go out and blow the whistle and call the firemen in to pick up the fire truck and tell them where the fire was. So that was one of the biggest surprises for writing the whole book.
It's actually interesting and funny. You have a book signing coming up. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. There's a book signing on October the 7th, starting at noon, at Darby's Antique Emporium, which is a huge antique store at Market Street and Western Reserve Road. And Bob Neapolitan, the owner of Darby's, has 5 members of his family who were firefighters. And I had talked to him at length about the history of his uncles and father and the other members. And he showed me helmets from the firefighters. And so he was really proud of his family's history. And so as I had called a couple months ago to ask another question, he says, "Jim, would you like a book signing?" And why, sure. So I'll be sitting in the front of his store with my books and on October the 7th. And I'll be selling Signal 55, which is a two-piece book. It was so big they wouldn't print all of this in one book. So I have a main body of the book, and I have all the extras written into the smaller book. I'll have both books on sale. It's a two-piece set. You pay one price of $45, and you get both books of the set.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Chief Dorman.
Jayden, I really appreciate it, and I thank you for having me.
Join us next time. I am Jayden Watkins for BSTN. Have an excellent day.